We have been in a series for a few weeks called what? He said, what? Yeah, Alex kicked off the series. I taught last week, and so we're in week 3. And in this series, we are looking at some of the tough sayings of Jesus, some of these difficult sayings. And Jesus is known, has been known, is known to say some things that are kind of tough. They're difficult and challenging. And I think that they're really valuable. And so we are looking at these things and seeing exactly what is it that Jesus is telling his followers to do. So we're looking at these tough sayings of Jesus. And often what we see that Jesus is saying is it is very inconvenient for us. It's not something that typically fits with our normal picture of life. It's not always something that we want to do. But nonetheless, Jesus said it, and so we listen to it. Alex talked to you guys the first week. Does anybody remember the phrase? What was it? Hate your mother. All right, yeah. He talked about that in the first week, and he talked about how Jesus challenges us to really count the cost before committing to that relationship with him. And he points out how Jesus highlights these really key family relationships and also the most important things of life to really consider those and what it might cost us to follow Jesus. Last week, we talked about the first line up there, I am the way, where Jesus said he is the way. And we learned that Jesus is the way. He is the way, and he is the only way. Do you guys remember that part from last week? Jesus is the only way. And the idea, we talked a little bit about how, like, people might say that all paths will lead to God. And we showed through the Bible about how it is explicit that Jesus and what he did, that it is the only way. There was no other way that we can get to God other than through Jesus. Tonight we're going to look at our third difficult saying from Jesus, and we find it in Matthew's account of Jesus' life, chapter 16, verses 25 and 26. Let's look at that together. Then Jesus told his disciples, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. We are going to look specifically at that part of the verse where it says, take up his cross. We're going to call it, take up your cross. Can you say that right now? That was terrible. All right, that was really bad. All right, you ready? I'm going to kind of give you a key. All right, you ready? On your mark, get set. Take up your cross. All right, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Thank you. I will take up my cross. And that is what we're going to talk about tonight. Now, I grew up in the church. I've been going to church my entire life, probably from before I even knew what church was. My family always took me to church. And I have heard this passage taught about and talked about in a lot of different ways. And we kind of would throw this phrase around, take up your cross. I want to share with you guys a few ways that I've heard this phrase talked about. I heard a story about a student who's going to a college, a Christian student, and he really wanted to share with his class about Jesus. And his professor, who was a well-known atheist, wouldn't allow him to. And so he just said, hey, you know what? This is my cross to bear. You guys ever heard a story, something like that? I think they made a movie on it, all right? Another way that I've heard this is a story about maybe someone who was born with some sort of physical limitation, as in like blindness or something like that. And they would say, well, God just made me the way that I am. He made me with this deformity. And so therefore, I am just going to bear this cross. This is I'm going to bear my cross. This is what God has given me with. I've also heard it like this. A student came to me one time and they said, Alan, I have this friend and they don't know Jesus. They don't love Jesus. And they're really causing me to sin a lot, but I just love this friend. I really want to be with this friend. And I really think that God has just called me to like stay in this relationship. And Alan, I just think that this is my cross to bear. All right. That was the way that I've heard this phrase used before. And I think I've heard stories, this phrase used about abusive relationships, about financial problems, even in sports analogies. We would take this phrase, it is my cross to bear. Take up your cross. Man, that's just what God's called you to do. Just bear your cross. We throw this phrase around on all sorts of things. And I think that how I've been taught this passage, and maybe you've heard this idea of taking up your cross, I think that it is evidence for this reality, that we want to take the sayings of Jesus and we want to water them down to fit our inconvenient American lifestyle. We want to take these things of Jesus and say, oh, well, Jesus is telling me to bear my cross. I guess I just got to stay in that relationship, right? And in reality, what Jesus is teaching his disciples and what everybody else around Jesus thought about when Jesus said, take up your cross, is nothing like the way that we would typically hear this phrase, or we would throw around this idea in our little Christian subculture. He's asking Christians to take up your cross. And so I want to look at, what does the cross resemble? For Jesus, for his disciples, for the people that are listening to him, what does the cross actually resemble? I think as Americans, we love the cross. Is anybody wearing a piece of cross jewelry right now? A few people? Yeah, we wear cross jewelry. We get like a cross tattooed on our arm, maybe with like cool swords and stuff. Like, we love the cross. It is this like canny, like beautiful picture of our Christian lifestyle, and we love it. We just think it's like the coolest, cutest thing ever. And for Jesus, and for all of those listening to his words when Matthew wrote his account of the Gospels, the cross resembles death. It resembles a public humiliation for Jesus. It was shameful. It was this like nasty thing. And we take that gruesome picture of the cross and we get like cool tattoos on our body with it, and we wear like cross jewelry because we think it's cute and awesome. For Jesus, it did not mean that. Jesus, he might have, I don't know that they had tattoos back then, but Jesus might have had tattoo, but he would not have like gotten a cute, cool cross on his shoulder or something like that. I don't think he would. I don't know. He might have. Yeah, you think Jesus had tattoo? Face tats, yeah. He looked like Post Malone a little bit. Yeah. All right, no. So Jesus is looking his disciples in the face, and he's telling them, he's like, eye to eye. Ellie, look at me. Not you, her. Yeah, I know you're both named Ellie. This has happened before. Anyways, Ellie is looking his disciples in the face. He's like, if you're going to follow me, you're going to die a nasty death. You're going to be publicly humiliated in front of everybody. Now, is that something cool to get to like wear on a necklace or to like get a tattoo of? Because that's often what we think about for a cross, but it's not what Jesus thought about for a cross. And he's saying, if you can lose your life this way, you can find your life eternally satisfied. He says, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Take up his cross. I could try to describe to you what that was like, but I think it is better formatted into a video. So I got a short video that I want you to watch that resembles what it would look like for Jesus to take up his cross. So check this out. And I think that is a better picture of when Jesus is saying, take up your cross. That is the picture that he had in mind of crucifixion, of being dragged through the streets. I actually think that that's probably a fairly PG rating of what the crucifixion and carrying the cross and how brutal it would have been. But I think that's probably the best video that I can show here to you, all right? It was not a pretty thing. It was gross. It was gruesome. So when Jesus said that, deny yourself, take up your cross, that's the image that he thought of. Not I got to share my faith in private now because my teacher won't let me share it in front of the whole classroom, or not, I guess I got to stay in this relationship because, it's burdensome and all, but Jesus has called me to it, right? That's what we think of, but that's not what Jesus thought of. That's not what his disciples were thinking of when he said that, take up your cross. So if that's what the cross resembles for Jesus, his disciples, and I think we can begin to see some of that, then what does the cross require? What does it require of us? What does it require of Christians? For the disciples, they had a choice at this point that Jesus is saying, anyone who comes after me, who follows me, must do these things. So the disciples could follow Jesus and deny themselves, take up their cross, right? Or they could what? Not, all right? They could not follow Jesus. They could go their own way. They could do their own thing and abide by their own rules and do whatever they wanted to do. One of those seems like the easy choice, the easy way out, and one of those seems like the commitment to follow Jesus, to follow through on these things. And obviously the disciples chose that, at least 11 out of 12. And I want us to talk about what that path would look like. taking up their cross required them to commit. It required them to buy in, that they were going to follow Jesus no matter what. Jesus is basically saying, you're going to follow me until you die of crucifixion, die the worst death that you could die right now, is what the disciples are making in that choice. It also required them to say no to themselves, to say no to their plans for their lives, their ambitions, their dreams, all the things, their hopes, their likes and their dislikes. It required them to say, all right, I'm saying no to all of those things for the sake of obeying God, for the sake of following Jesus and going this path to committing to him. And guess what that means for us? It requires us to say no to ourselves. That's the whole deny yourself. And to take up our cross, to say no to ourselves, to our hopes and our dreams and our plans and our passions, our desires, our likes, our dislikes. It means that we are saying no to those things. We are denying ourselves of the things that we want and saying instead we're going to go the route that Jesus has provided for us. Saying no to my future career, my relationships, the things that I find most important, and saying I'm going to filter all of that through obedience to God, through doing whatever God has told me to do. And that is what we are saying no to. We're denying ourselves. And by saying no to something, we end up saying yes to something else, sort of this balancing act. And what we're saying yes to is to humiliation. For Jesus to be crucified, to be dragged through the streets, for people chanting and cheering at his death was humiliating. It was shameful for them. They were being ridiculed. We're saying yes to ridicule when we say we're going to follow Jesus no matter what. We're saying yes to obedience, to obeying what God had called us to do. I thought of a couple ways this might play itself out. I think we could put 100 different scenarios in this situation. But here is a couple that I thought of. You're hanging out with the boys, all right? So I'm going to split this. You're all in here, but think this is mostly for our guys. It could be for our girls too. You're hanging out with the boys. Do any of you girls have friends that you call the boys? All right. You're hanging out with the boys, all right? And they're all bragging and talking about watching porn, all right? And you say, yeah, all right. And you say, you know what? I think God has called me to not do that. And so I know I've struggled with that, but that's something that I'm not going to do anymore. And the boys are going to what? They're going to make fun of you. You're going to be humiliated. They're going to ridicule you. Girls, you're hanging out with the crew, the ladies, the gals, the homies, the friends. And they're talking about their relationships with other guys. And they're saying, yeah, it's been great. We do this, we do that. And you say, you know what? I think that God has called me to wait on that, to wait until marriage before I do anything intimate with a guy. And so that's something that I thought about, I've struggled with, but it's something I committed not to do. And the girls are going to what? They're going to laugh at you. All right? Now, you could put 100 different scenarios into that. You could talk about anything, all right? About things that we see happen in our friend groups all the time. And as Christians, we know that they're the wrong thing. We know that we ought to not gossip and lie and to break the law and to do all these things. We know that we're not supposed to. And by standing up and saying, hey, I'm a Christian, and I'm not trying to be like a goody two-shoes or like holier than thou, but I really don't think that's something I got to do. I got to call my parents. I got to get out of here. And they're going to laugh at you. You're going to be the joke. They're going to ridicule you. You're going to be humiliated. And that is one way that humiliation for the sake of Jesus can play itself out in our culture today. Now, is that as bad as being butt naked, stripped through the streets, being yelled at and cheered for your death? No, all right? But humiliation nonetheless. And by following Jesus and by saying, take up your cross, he's telling the disciples, be willing to be humiliated and ridiculed in front of everybody, even if it means death. That is what he's saying when he's saying, take up your cross. When everyone around Jesus is chanting at him, saying, Jesus, King of the Jews, they made it as a joke about him. What an idiot, what a hypocrite, what a fraud. That's what those people are cheering at Jesus as he's being drugged through the streets. And everyone else is cheering and they're saying, that's crazy, what an idiot. And you're saying, I want to be more like Jesus. Do you feel the weight of that? When he's telling the disciples, take up your cross and follow me, I want to be more like Jesus. I want to be the person carrying the cross, being yelled at, people cheering at my death. That's what Jesus meant when he said, deny yourself, deny the things that you think are important, your passions, your desires, your plans. Give those to Jesus. Follow God's will. And take up your cross. Be willing to be humiliated and ridiculed for the sake of Jesus. That's what he's saying. To say no to yourself and all the things you want and desire, and to say yes to obedience to Jesus in every possible way and fashion. It's not a convenient saying. It's not something that you're like, I'm a Christian, yeah, let's go, all right? Nobody hears that phrase and is excited to be humiliated and ridiculed and to have to say no to all these other things. It's just not something that we hear and are all giddy about. But it is the truth. And I think that's what Jesus is calling his followers to do. With a lot of passages about Jesus, we talked about how we're reading through Matthew's account of the gospel. With a lot of those passages, Jesus would teach the same story a lot of times. He would share the same story now, and 3 months later, he's with a different group of people. His disciples are still there. He shares it again. And so we find another account of this story over in Luke's account of the gospel. And this is what Luke says in chapter 9, verse 23. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. We see the exact same phrasing, except Luke adds in another word, which Jesus might have said at a different time. He says, if anyone, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily. He says daily. He's like, daily, you got to look at yourself in the mirror. I don't think they had mirrors back then, but for you guys, look at yourself in the mirror and say, today, I'm going to say no to my desires and no to my plans and my hopes and my dreams and the things that I want in my relationships and my likes and dislikes. I'm saying no to all of that, and I'm saying yes to following Jesus. I'm saying no to just kind of going with the flow and falling into peer pressure, and saying yes to standing up for what's right, even if it means I'll get humiliated in front of my friends daily. I think that one of the clearest pictures I've ever heard of or seen in kind of the American culture of what it looks like to really bear your cross, to take up your cross, is something like this news report from April of 1999. Were any of you alive then? How many of you were alive in 99? Just leaders. Oh, Josh, April? Yeah. 1999. Okay, never mind. In Littleton, Colorado. It reads, I'm just reading the news report. This is on the front page. It says, do you believe in God? One of the heavily armed gunmen asked the shy blonde girl reading her Bible in the library Tuesday morning while her school was under siege. Yes, I believe in God. She replied in a voice strong enough to be heard by classmates cowering under nearby tables and desks. The gunman in the long black trench coat laughed. Why? He asked mockingly. Then he raised his gun and shot and killed 17-year-old Cassie Bernal. Bear your cross. Take up your cross. A humiliating death in front of her friends. That might be the clearest and most gruesome picture that I can think of what it might look like in today's society. Now, will that scenario ever happen to you? Chances are it never will. And if you were in that scenario, would you be able to answer that question the same way she did? I don't think I could. I've thought about it. What would it be if I had to choose life or death simply by saying, yes, I believe in God? I've rationalized it in my head. Well, God would know. He would know what I'm thinking. I'm trying to save my life so I can tell other people about God and all this stuff. I've rationalized it. I don't know that if I were put in that situation that I could do the same thing she did. But taking up your cross, bearing your cross, saying believing in God means death, that might be the clearest picture. And that was 20-something years ago. When Jesus is telling them, if you come after me, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me, it's not this happy thing that we can all get behind and cheer and chant. It's simply us saying, I'm going to say no to all the things that I want and desire and say yes to obedience to God and his word. And then to take humiliation and ridicule over convenience. To say, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to follow through in obedience, even if it means humiliation and ridicule or death. I want you guys to take some time tonight to really discuss some of these things around these tables. We've been doing this every night. It's just a chance for you guys to really talk about some of the things that I've talked about up here and to kind of discuss those a little more. There's 3 questions. We can throw them up there. I want you to answer the first 2 as a group, all right? So go as a group, answer those things together. And that's a beautiful typo. What do you benormally, all right? That's just normally. It's abnormal, but it's normally. 1 and 2 together. And then on number 3, if you could do that one on your own. So answer 1 and 2 together, and then everybody just on their own at their table, write down at the bottom of your card number 3. I think there could be some things that would come up in that you don't want to admit. You don't want to talk about around these people around your table that you might not know. But I want you to be as real and as honest as you can be, all right? When you think of those things, just be completely honest about what things might you need to give up in order to fully follow Jesus. All right, so you can go ahead and break out the table. Let's do about 8 people at each table, and you can pick up your chair, and you can take that with you, and we will jump back together here in just a couple minutes. All right, I hope you've had enough time to really discuss through those questions together, to get to that last one on your own, to really kind of get real about what kinds of things would you need to give up, to deny yourself. Because the phrase that we looked at tonight is take up your cross, but it's sort of threefold. It's deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow him. All right, that's like the threefold. And the first part of that process is to say, I'm going to deny myself the things that I really want, my hopes and dreams and all of those things, and say, I'm going to give those to Jesus. I'm going to follow his will. I'm going to do what he wants me to do instead of prioritizing what I want to do. Alex and Caleb are going to bring in a cross. Alex is going to take the base, and Caleb is going to bear his cross right now. Thank you, Caleb. Not as gruesome as we all paint it out to be, but. And this is what I want you to do. I want everybody at their table right now. I want you to tear off the bottom of your card. Whether you're going to do this or not, everybody just go ahead and tear off the bottom. I even did like a little dotted line for you. It's beautiful. Tear off the bottom of that card. I should hear like a bunch of people ripping stuff off of their paper. This is your one chance to be destructive, all right? And this is what I want us to do. Focus in for me for just a second. We talked about denying ourselves, giving up those things. And it's easy to write it down on a piece of paper. It's even easy to do what I'm about to tell you to do. It's harder even so to really commit to it. And we learned tonight that in Luke's account, he says to deny yourself, take up your cross, follow him. How often? Daily. And so what we might do tonight doesn't kind of mean for the rest of our life, but at least it could start something today and continue on daily. And as we close tonight in worship, I'm going to go ahead and have the band to go ahead and come back up. We're going to worship a little bit more tonight. And as we do that, I want you to really consider, are these things, the things you wrote down, your hopes and dreams and ambitions and likes and dislikes, are those things that you're willing to give up? Are they things that you're willing to say, all right, I will give up my plan for the future. I will give up where I think is the best place to go to college. I'm going to give up what I think is the best relationship to be in, the most important things to me. And I'm going to say, God, what is the most important thing? God, what school should I go to? God, what relationship should I be in? Are those things that you're willing to give up? And if so, I just want you to symbolically take that piece of paper, and I want you to give it to the cross. As we talked about the cross tonight, the first part of all of this is denying yourself and saying these are things that are not as important to me as is my relationship with God. Doing that and taking up your cross daily. So that is my hope. So as we worship tonight and as you're singing, if you're led to, I want you to just take those hopes and dreams and ambitions and say, I'm going to give that to Jesus. And from today and each day, I'm going to say, God, I want to do what you want me to do. So I hope that is something that you're willing to do tonight. I'm going to pray. We're going to worship together to close out the night. So let me pray. God, thank you for the opportunity now to worship you, both through action of giving away ourselves to you and also through singing. I pray that tonight you would work in our lives and in our heart as we've discussed things. Pray you would do that. We pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.